coronavirus pandemic has made us all ask some big questions about life. And one of those questions that we might be asking is this: is there any hope? As we look at the chaotic and confusing situation around our world and in our own countries, is there any hope? I don't know about you, but I've found myself checking the news updates on my phone a lot more regularly during this time than at any other point in my life. Now, of course, in one sense, that's totally understandable, isn't it? When global events have massive implications for us, for our freedom and for our lives, we want to know what's going on. But maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe our near addiction to checking news updates at this time is a betrayal of the fact that all of us are looking for hope. We all want to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, that this situation isn't going to go on forever. We want to know whether things are going to get better. But of course, if you're looking for good news, then looking at a news update is rarely a good thing to do. But on a bigger scale, is there any hope? As we look at our world, is there really any hope for it? People talk about going back to normal. By that, they often mean going back to the way the world was a few months ago. Of course, that was a world without coronavirus, but it was still a world where over 3 million children each year die of preventable diseases. It was still a world full of conflict and disease and death and sadness. Do we really just want to go back to the way the world was? Or is there something in us that longs for something even more than that? Longs to be in a world where there is no suffering, no sadness, no disease, no death, no tears. We long for the world to be somehow different to our experience of it now. I was reading a newspaper recently and there was a cartoon that caught my eye. It was a picture of God looking at planet Earth in the context, of course, of the current situation. And an angel was asking God this question: why don't you just turn the whole thing off and turn it back on again? Now, of course, that's what we do when technology goes wrong, and often it seems to fix the problem. But is there a sense in which God could just reset things, put things right? Well, actually, that is getting on something that's real, because the Bible says that although we live in a world which is not the way it once was, it's also not the way it one day will be. The Christian hope is not simply that we leave these bodies and leave this world and float to a cloud called heaven and play harps and go to choir practice for all eternity. The Christian hope is for the redemption, the renewal and the transformation of literally everything. The Bible speaks of a new creation, a day when God will get rid of all that causes pain and suffering and sadness to this world, a day when he'll wipe away every tear, a day when he will put what is wrong right. At the end of the Lord of the Rings stories, there's this beautiful moment when Frodo wakes up and he sees around his bed Gandalf and his friends, and he realizes that he's alive. And he exclaims, "Gandalf, I thought you were dead. I thought I was dead." And then he asks this amazing question. He says, "Is everything sad going to come untrue?" The beautiful story of the Christian faith is that there is a day when everything sad will come untrue. God is going to put this broken world right, not just back to the way it once was, but somehow even better than it ever could have been. Now at this, maybe there are two objections that come to our minds. The first is to say, well, isn't this just wishful thinking? Isn't this some Freudian projection of our human desires into the heavens? But actually, what I want to say is this: the Christian faith is not too good to be true, but it is good because it is true. It's based on the historical, verifiable fact of the historical resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's something we can investigate and look into for ourselves. It's not wishful thinking. It's based on something that's real. In fact, the early Christians were quick to say that if the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen, the whole Christian faith would fall down like a pack of cards. It's not worth believing in. But it is something we can check out, investigate and look into. But the other objection to this Christian hope might be something like this: what does that do for my life today? Is it just pie in the sky? How does that affect my life in the present? But what I want to say is that Christian hope is not just about what happens in the future, but knowing what is going to happen in the future should change the way we live today. And actually it has done for Christians down through the centuries. One of the fascinating things when we look at the rise of Christianity in the first few centuries is how the Christian faith grew dramatically during times of great plague and pandemic in the Roman Empire. The plagues that swept through the Roman Empire in some of the first few centuries of the Christian church claimed up to a third or a quarter of the populations of some of these cities. But at a time when the population of these cities was in great decline, the numbers of people adhering to the Christian faith was going up. Now, why was that the case? Well, the Roman Emperor Julian documents that Christians were known not just for risking their lives to care for their own sick, but actually caring for the sick who were outside the Christian community. He was scandalized by this. But why did they do that? Why did Christians do what no one else seemingly was willing to do at that time, risk their lives to care for those who were sick? Well, Rodney Stark, a social historian who's investigated this and documents it in his book, The Rise of Christianity, says it's not because the Christians were somehow more brave, somehow more courageous than anyone else in society that they were willing to do that. But he said the reason why Christians were willing to do that is that they were simply acting consistently with their belief system. You see, if your belief system says that death is the end, then the worst thing that can happen to you is you die. And so you'll do anything to avoid that terrible fate. But if your belief system says that death is not the end, and you believe in someone who has come back from death, resurrecting, conquering death and defeating it, and if you believe that the best is yet to come, then you may well be willing to literally risk your life to care for others, because you know that you're not risking everything. You know what is ahead of you, and that future hope transforms and changes you and liberates you to serve and to help in a broken and messy world. And the story of the Christian church, checkered as it has been through the centuries, has often shown how Christians who have been dominated by that wonderful hope of the resurrection have been those who have made the biggest difference for good in this world that we live in today. Christian hope doesn't detach us from the realities of this broken world. It doesn't make us bury our head in the sand. But it sends us out into a broken world to want to make a difference and to live out that hope that we have in Jesus. And that wonderful hope can be a wonderful thing for each one of us as we face the reality of death. Tragically, friends of mine recently lost their daughter to cancer. And yet through that horrific process of a couple of years as they knew what was going to happen, although there was sadness and sorrow and pain, there was also an incredible sense of hope and indeed joy, because they knew where their daughter was going. And she did herself. She had absolute certainty and security because of Jesus, because of his resurrection. She was able to say, this is just a blip on the road to eternity. We're all just passing through. I wonder, do you know that hope, that certainty and that security, that even if coronavirus were to take you, the best is yet to come because Jesus Christ is alive? That hope can be yours, and that hope is not just for the future. It can transform your life today.